Thanks, Meg. So gratitude as the central kind of disposition as we enter into ecological spirituality, which is one of the 7 goals of the Laudato Si action platform. And so to begin, we are going to be doing a lot of kind of reflective practices at the beginning of our time together, but we are just going to start with a brief prayer to begin.
So this is a prayer for COP26, the big international climate meeting, which will be ending tomorrow. So let's just take a moment to quiet ourselves, to bring ourselves into the presence of our loving Creator. Loving God, we praise your name with all you have created. You are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of creatures. We acknowledge the responsibilities you have placed upon us as stewards of your creation. May the Holy Spirit inspire all political leaders at COP26 as they seek to embrace the changes needed to foster a more sustainable society. Instill in them the courage and gentleness to implement fairer solutions for the poorest and most vulnerable, and commit their nations to the care of our common home. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son. Amen.
Thanks, Meg. And for those who just joined, I threw the agenda in the chat so you can see the plan for today. Before we get started, I just always like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I am located on the land that is currently known as Cleveland, Ohio. And I think especially as we think about gratitude in the United States in the month of November, a lot of that is around Thanksgiving. And so I think that this is especially a time where we really need to think back on the legacy of our country and of colonization. And so to begin, in recognizing the land upon which I reside, I express deep gratitude to the Native people who lived and worked here before me, those whose stewardship and resilient spirits have sustained the sacred land, which is the traditional homeland of the Erie, Lenape, Delaware, Shawnee, Wyandot, Miami, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and other Great Lakes tribes. And I would just also like to recognize the fact that there are nearly 28,000 Native American people who currently live in Northeast Ohio and who have done a lot of advocacy, especially around our baseball team's name. And it was recently changed. And so that was just kind of one small step in the right direction. And Meg, if you're able from our script, would you mind dropping the native lands link in the chat if you can find it? So if you are interested in learning more about the people who are indigenous to the land that you currently occupy, we will put that in the chat. The other thing that I always like to do is an acknowledgement of context. And this is just really a moment to recognize, especially I think with COP26 happening, that we gather in a very important historical moment when the human species is having an unprecedented impact on the planet. And so we just state this at the beginning of a gathering, of our gathering together today, to recognize that like sometimes coming to a meeting like this, it feels like, oh, maybe this doesn't really matter, but the discussions that we're having and the decisions and actions that we take as a result will have consequences for other people and species now and in future generations. So just thank you for being here and being present to this. So I'm just going to do a little brief context setting, and then Meg is going to lead us through a few practices, and then hopefully the bulk of our time together will be spent in conversation. In terms of thinking about gratitude and ecological spirituality, I have always been struck, I'm a spiritual director in the Ignatian tradition, and I've always been struck by St. Ignatius saying that ingratitude is the cause, beginning, and origin of all evils and sins. And I think that this mindset really of ingratitude has created the current climate crisis that we're in the world around us today. It's responsible for the forcible displacement of indigenous communities and enslaved people. And I just think that, you know, this perspective of ingratitude and not seeing the preciousness and the sacredness of human life, right, if we can do that to other people, then obviously, it's easy to kind of invalidate the sacredness of the rest of creation. And so as we continue on our journey to renewal and to begin again, we know that a transition to a disposition of gratitude is essential as we work to bring about abundant life, and the abundant life that's promised in the gospel. And so I just invite you to look at this picture, because I think that as I ponder gratitude and eco-spirituality, I think of these moments that really have pulled me out of myself and have helped me to transcend myself in nature because of its beauty and this sense of awe. And so St. Ignatius invites us to ground ourselves in a disposition of gratitude in the spiritual exercises and in the examen prayer. And because we recognize that all we have and all we've experienced this day is a gift from God. And so as we are a gift of and from the divine, we're invited to make a return to God, to God's people, to God's creation, and gratitude. And I think that this, like, just looking at this picture and thinking about gratitude, it says, something special about the nature of God. God is this generous, loving giver, right? Showering us with blessings like the sun shining on the earth. And if we truly understood this in our hearts, we would return this love in kind. So I think that as we think about this disposition of gratitude as foundational to eco-spirituality, I invite you to think about those moments of wonder and awe that you've also had in nature, maybe in, a big place like a national park, but I also just have these tiny moments with like my cat at home, or sometimes as the sunlight is coming through the trees at just like a certain angle, right? You just have these moments that kind of help you to pause and transcend yourself. And I also, just as we continue, invite you to really think about this idea of gratitude and nature and the environment as kind of a grounding force as we think about this idea of climate disruption. And in your agenda, you'll see an article that a colleague wrote about gratitude as a grounding force. And like, sometimes we think about gratitude and it just feels like this warm, fuzzy thing, but I think that it is actually quite powerful and can center us deeply as we need to sustain ourselves in this work that can often feel tiring and hard. And so right now, I just invite you, there's this beautiful quote from Laudato that I'm going to read, and I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and listen, and then to just kind of think about if there is a particular place where you feel like this quote describes. So, soil, water, mountains, everything as it were a caress of God. The history of our friendship with God is always linked to particular places which take on an intensely personal meaning. We all remember places, and revisiting those memories does us much good. Anyone who's grown up in the hills or used to sit by the spring to drink or played outdoors in the neighborhood square, going back to these places is a chance. My happy places, Bethlehem Farm in West Virginia. It's a Catholic worker, an old Catholic worker farm, and there's just so much goodness there. And so I just invite you to kind of take a moment and think about what is one of my happy places, or what is my happy place, this place where I go, I feel close to my true self, and I feel the caress of God. If you want to type in the chat, just kind of name that place, and you're welcome to do so. But I hope that as you think about that place, there is this sense of warmth and gratitude welling up inside, and that can be kind of the center from which we continue to have this conversation and to do this work. And the final thing I just wanted to share, so if you're aware, the Ignatian Solidarity Network, we always have a national conference every year, and it just happened this past weekend. And we had a guest, Paul Campion, who is a Loyola University Chicago alum. He's a part of the Sunrise Movement. He was one of the 5 hunger strikers sitting outside of the White House requesting kind of climate legislation that meets the urgency of this moment. And when I spoke to him, he was talking about why and how he does this work. And he said this quote, "There's so much to win." And this was a big paradigm shift for me, because I've really been focused on like, there's so much to lose. Like, what are we losing? We're losing so much. And it's really the sense of grieving. And I think that that is a piece of this work. But hearing Paul talk about, you know, there are so many clean jobs that we could have. We could have neighborhoods, you know, that are healthy to live in, where neighbors know each other and where they support each other. There, you know, there's just this imagination. And so I think that this is also related to gratitude and to our dreams, and to kind of this world that we hope and imagine for. And so I just wanted to share that briefly, because it's just been very inspirational to me as I think about how the disposition with which I want to enter into this work and continue this work. Very quickly, before we jump into Meg leading us through some gratitude practices, I did just want to give a few brief Laudato Si action platform updates for folks who are on the call. So the official launch is November 14th, so that'll be happening next week. I am told there will be a ton of resources added to the website, so get ready. It's going to be very exciting. And the other great thing is that we're getting pledges and commitments right now, but you can actually sign up through April of 2022. So there's like a very big window. And I think that that's exciting, because we'll be continuing these conversations, and it'll just be more opportunity to invite more people in. Oh, and then finally, I wanted to share, I don't know that this really matters, but if you're really following the 7 goals, you're very excited about them. The wording has changed for the 7th goal of the platform, and I really like it. It's the same idea, but they shifted it from community engagement and participatory action to community resilience and empowerment, which I think that's lovely language. So if you notice a shift, or you're like, oh, that sounds different, it's because it is. I'm not sure it's been updated everywhere on the website yet, but it will by the 14th. So those are the big announcements. We're still on the journey. It's kicking off in November, and then we'll have 7 years to continue this together. Yes, and again, just if you're just jumping into Renewing the Earth, we've had lots of people signing up. These are the 7 goals of the framework. And on your agenda, you have links to lots of resources where you can access them. So now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Meg, and she is going to lead us through some grounding practices.
Thanks, Brenna. So in kind of brainstorming, when Brenna and I were brainstorming what we wanted to talk about for this session, something that we talked a lot about, as she mentioned, is this idea that ecological work, ecological justice, just reading the news about, environmental news can be really draining. And so I thought, rather than giving a presentation about the practices and ecological spirituality and different kind of ecological prayer practices, I thought we could do them together. So I have 2 practices that we'll work through. The first is a little bit more individual, and the second is a bit more communal. And there will be opportunity for conversation both in this large group and then hopefully in your breakout sessions. And really rooting this in Ignatian spirituality and some of the key practices of Ignatian spirituality, right? Imagination and contemplation, alongside and walking alongside God in creation. And so I also wanted to start with an acknowledgement, especially when we're talking about eco-spirituality, and in the United States and where I am, I'm on, excuse the flight path that I'm under. I'm on traditional Piscataway and Anacostan land here in Washington, D.C., but there's a long-standing tradition, right, of ecological spirituality in Indigenous communities. And so I wanted to start with this quote from Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation from the region that Brenna is in, and the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, which I think has become a kind of a hit book recently, but I do think it is a fantastic book. And it certainly changed the way that I see ecological spirituality. So this quote, knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. And so I want to really root ourselves in this idea that we love the earth and that the earth loves us. And that's something that hopefully can sustain us, this idea and these prayer practices as we go back out into the world and into our work. And kind of use that to keep ourselves grounded and fulfilled as we're doing sometimes really challenging work. So Brenna, you could click the next slide, please. So I wanted to start with a Visio Divina practice, which Brenna kind of gave us a taste of a few minutes ago. So Visio Divina, much like Lectio Divina, is a visual prayer that invites us, as Walter Burghardt, Jesuit, would say, to take a long and loving look at the real. And I'm really sorry about the planes. And invite God into our visual imagination. And do that through a kind of an appreciation of our natural world and of creation. And so what I want to ask you to do right now is to either look out your window if you have a window available to you in which you can look out. It doesn't have to be at any great splendorous natural world. Even if it's just the sky or some clouds, or you can hold on to that happy place that you thought of before and think of that happy place. Or you can look at a recent photo that you've taken of somewhere in the natural world. That could be a pond or a park near your house. Again, I don't want to, I want to break down this notion that we are separate from creation. We're part of creation too, right? And so it could just be your back lawn. I'm just looking at my back garden right now. And if you don't have access to any of those things, Brenna, if you can just click the next slide. I have a photo that I've recently taken from the Great Falls National Park here in DC. So you can look at that. So we're going to use this image, whatever image you settle on, be it your open window, a photo on your phone, or this photo, or your imagination, to guide our prayer of gratitude and imagination for creation. So let's just start by zeroing in on this image, kind of let go of all these other sensory things in your mind, anything that's running around in your day. And let's just start by observing the image, the landscape that we have before us. Where does your eye first focus when you look at it? Where does it travel to next? Delight in the details of this image, the way that the light strikes the landscape, the colors, the textures, and the patterns. Immerse yourself in this scene. What do you smell? What do you feel? What do you hear? Imagine yourself journeying further into this landscape. You might imagine God or Jesus walking alongside you. What do you experience? Perhaps you come to a resting place. What does that look like? Imagine yourself as one with this creation. What does that mean to you? What are you doing? What are you feeling? Imagine this creation is speaking to you. What is it saying? Are there things that you can learn from its wisdom, from the patterns, from the light, from the way the wind is touching your face? What gifts and talents can you offer in return? Offer your gratitude to God and to this beautiful creation for the lands, the water, the air that sustain us, both physically and spiritually. Reflect on what has affected you in this prayer, invited you to think more deeply. Listen there, listen to God speaking to you through this prayer, and rest in that loving presence. And as we withdraw from this prayer and come back to the group, I want you to all reflect on what has emerged from you in this short practice, anything that you learned. And specifically, I want you to think about what gifts and talents, skills, or even actions you can offer and you offered in your prayer. And those can be, very metaphorical things, or they can be very actionable things. So as we're coming back to the group, I want us to choose 2 words that you feel can summarize your offering to creation, to this loving bond, this reciprocal bond that we are seeking to heal in our world right now. And Brenna, if you can click the next slide for me, please. And then the next one, please. So I want to shift us now, as we're coming back to the group, into the second kind of exercise. And I want to do kind of a modified spiritual conversation. So typically spiritual conversations happen in 3 rounds, right? The first is where we share the individual fruits of our prayers, which I see some people are already starting to do. And then the second, we're able to reflect on what other people have said and what that makes us think. And then in the third, it's more of a general reflection. So instead of going one by one, since we have a few people here, I thought maybe we could share these 2 words that we've reflected on, that we've pulled in the chat, and then just have a few moments, a few minutes to look through what other people have said, and see if that kind of inspires any reflection in you, if you feel any sort of resonance. So you can go ahead now and share those words in the chat.
Meg, maybe can you just say that end piece again? You cut out a little bit.
Yeah.
So we're sharing the 2 words and then.
Yeah. So if you could just share those 2 words of the gifts that you feel that you're bringing to creation, and then look through what other people have posted, and see if you find resonance in that. See just how that makes you feel, and if that makes you think of different things, and what that makes you reflect on.
Just for folks who are going to be watching the recording, see gratitude and awe-inspired care, peace and strength, myself, gratitude, freedom and beauty, resilience and appreciation, curiosity and discipline, art and exploration, protection and communion, hope and action, space and acceptance, abundant gratitude, presence and consistency, gratitude and admiration.
So as we're looking through these and Brenna is reading them out loud, thank you, Brenna. If we could just think about, what different words are resonating with you, what they're making you think. And then if anyone feels called to share with this large group some of their reflections on what they experienced in their prayer, what they brought to their prayer, and also what other people have shared. Please feel free to raise your hand, and I think we'll call on you.
And if you don't know how to raise your hand, you can just unmute, but it should be under, I think, reactions, if I'm not mistaken. These new words, power and water, hope and oneness, perpetual baptism.
Well, so if folks would prefer, what we can also do now is break into our breakout sessions, and you can have these conversations in a more in a smaller setting. So I think Brenna has a few more guiding questions. You can take these questions with you as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. And of course, my guiding questions, I'm going to stop sharing for a second because, of course, I forgot that slide. So I'm going to drop those into the chat. I will say, Meg. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to engage in conversation with folks from across our network. We wanted to just take the last couple of minutes to see if anyone has anything that they would like to share that came up in their breakout room that they think would be worthwhile sharing with a large group, or if you have any questions. So this is just kind of open time for whatever is on your minds.
Yeah, I put in just a link to our page because Father Geldrod, who is a Jesuit priest who is now the director of environmental justice at Georgetown, did a presentation for our green team, I think in September, and there's a recording of it. I was sharing with our group. it was well received with our team and then with the larger parish because it's just very matter of fact and given by a Jesuit, and it's like 8 slides. So I shared it there because I think it's pretty digestible. So
Thanks, Ashley. And I'll add that to the meeting notes so that people who watch this will be able to access that as well. I see that Nick Napolitano said a resource that was discussed in their group was how to help people, including ourselves, cope with the realities of environmental anxiety. So yeah, anything else anyone wants to say about that, or any resources that folks have to share?
I can just pass any kind of resources you wanted from Laudato Si. I just Laudato Si animator, and we get just plenty of resources of very various ways to communicate to other people. So I'm happy just to pass to whoever is interested. And I'm thinking the other day I read just one thing is only for communities of sisters, brothers. The lady that was before, it was from a community, I think. And this is a commitment just to pray, but it's only just for communities. So it is interesting, I can search for as well.
Okay, yeah, if you have any resources that you'd like to share with the group, I would be happy to put them in the resource guide. The other thing that I wanted to share just quickly is a colleague shared, and I just put this in the notes. There's like a Laudato Si Action Platform promo pack that was sent out by the Dicastery Committee. So it's I just posted it in the chat, and it's got just a lot of resources about the platform and the launch. So if you're excited about posting about that on social media, hopefully that is helpful. I know it's 4:30 right now, so I just have 2 slides to share really quickly, and then we'll send you on your way. And I hope that these will be helpful. The first slide is just to save the date. So this is, we'll be meeting next month on Thursday, December 9th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern to explore the themes of Advent simplicity, which, you know, adopting simple lifestyles is one of the Laudato Si Action Platform goals. We'll be doing that in conversation with the theme of pilgrimage. So, and then the other resource that I just briefly wanted to share for anyone who is working in schools is that the International Jesuit Secretariat has put together this great resource that is just a bunch of discussion questions for different stakeholders at schools to think about as they're thinking about implementing any sort of care for our common home framework at their schools. So I think that this could be a really wonderful kind of additional resource to use in schools to help you in this discernment process. So you can either scan the QR code at the bottom right, or I will also send this out in the follow-up resources so that you'll have access to this. So we thank you so much. It's 4:31. I know people are busy. I will stick around if anyone has any questions, and thank you so much for being here. We hope to see you next month. We hope that the conversations went well. If anyone wants to stick around and has any feedback about how we can make these sessions more fruitful or yeah, just to function better, I'm also open to feedback. I hope that this feels helpful and life-giving. So thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving to those of you who celebrate, and we'll see you next month.